The reason that I wanted to go on Zoom was I miss seeing people. I hated seeing little emoticons waving, hello, little notes, we're here now. And I thought if I could actually see people, they could actually ask questions, we could actually have what passed for a human interface. And I'm actually delighted to see everybody, but I realize it poses problems. And so I wanted to set some housekeeping rules, which will help. So one of the things that Zen pays a lot of attention to is precision. And one of the things we're pretty precise about is time. The sun doesn't slow down so spring can catch up. Time is kind of a relentless pressure. And certainly in human affairs, it's a relentless pressure. And one of the reasons that we learn to deal with it, and one of the reasons that we have really precise schedules in Zen monasteries and such, is so that we learn to take control of the 24 hours so that we're not driven by it. And at first, it's kind of difficult. What's a minute or two here among friends? But when meditation says we're going to begin at 10 o'clock, we're going to begin at 10 o'clock. And it's actually rude to people to come in after 10 o'clock because you're all on the screen and you're fidgeting and moving and wiggling around, and people are trying to stay calm and contracted. So from now on, I'm going to put classes up at like 9:55. Say we're going to start at 9:55. And my hope is that people will be in their place and be sitting by 10 o'clock so that we can take 10 minutes. Another thing I'd like to urge you to do, and the reason that I think that not all of you have practiced Zen meditation, is I see you sitting in different postures and I see a lot of fidgeting and people scratching their faces or adjusting themselves or changing their posture. And every time you do that, you miss the opportunity to study your reaction to little discomfort and little irritation. And so if you'll actually sit with an itch and not honor it right away, you'll learn something about yourself. And if you sit with a little discomfort and you don't try to fix it, unless it signals dangerous pain, you'll learn something about yourself and you'll develop your will and you develop your stability, and you'll find that you develop an ability to withstand a lot of the small knocks and booms of everyday life. So at the end of this, I invite anyone who'd like to stay, and I'll show you the way we sit Zen meditation. Not saying that it's better than any other meditation, but it's the one I'm qualified to teach and the one that I can attest to its efficacy. So thank you for that. And thank you very much, first of all, for showing up. So I was going to talk about delusion today, and it's always best to start with my own, because every time I pick a subject, I find I'm rubbing my nose in the very thing that I want to talk about. So, oh, this is my daughter's calling, sorry. So I use this little program I have for many years called Insight Timer. It looks like this. It was a very small, reliable, free app. It has chimes that you can get. You can pick this, you can pick the bells you want. You can set the time. It's just perfect. And I've used it for many years, and I've given away many copies and turned people onto it. And about a month ago, they upgraded it. And for the last month, I've been trying to find the timer. And so it's defeated me every day. I can find lectures by attractive women in leotards. I can find lectures on being gentle at work. This morning when I went on to ask Google how to do this, there was a dizzy blonde girl who was making hashtag signals and wanted to explain how much money she had made using Insight Timer. And of course, my response to that was start the killing. Google letter bombs. What can we do? This is like this has to stop right now. And then eventually I remembered that I was going to be talking about delusion. And I thought, well, my own is a good place to start. Why was I so angry? Well, I was angry because I was frustrated and I couldn't use this little tool which I depend on. But that wasn't really why I was angry. I was angry because somebody had broken the water pipe in my house yesterday. And when I got up this morning, water had been running, and it took me a great deal of time to get ready for my Dharma talk, which I had to sacrifice to that broken pipe. So when I tracked it down, yes, Insight Timer had corporatized, and they were trying to sell mindfulness as an antidote to, human reactions to doing jobs you don't like. But really, I was angry because I had run out of time, and the fates were against me. So evolutionarily, it must have served us to think of ourselves as separate from the rest of the universe. It must have. If the ego hadn't had survival capabilities, it would never have survived the crucible of evolution. And when the Buddha pointed out that the human package arrives with greed, hate, and delusion, we can soften it. We can say greed, we can substitute attraction. For hatred, we can say aversion. And for delusion, we could say stupid. But really, we all start with that. And the central delusion is the half of reality that we avoid by thinking that we have a fixed, single, separate, graspable, understandable, permanent self. It only takes about 5 minutes of examination. Just ask yourself, could that self exist without oxygen or sunlight or water? Take it on out as far as you want to go. So that you see that while it's true that we have a separate, whoever's dog that is, please mute your mic. While we have a separate form for a while, that form is not independent of the rest of the universe. It's been supported by the rest of the universe from the very instant we sperm and egg met. So what are the implications of feeling that we're separate? Well, first of all, we're stripped of the great power of the universe. We're stripped of being connected to the kind of pregnant energy that is immense fecundity, that is always transforming itself into forms, countless infinite forms. That's the only way that we can see and perceive emptiness, is by the manifesting of infinite forms. Second of all, how can we feel anything but puny next to the immensity of the universe? And so this puniness, this fear, leads us to believe that we can be extinguished, leads us to believe that we will have a separate fate from the rest of the universe. That's partly true, but it's also partly untrue. And so you can't have heads of a coin without having tails of a coin. And the fact that we just look at one side, which is our habitual, personal, small mind, egocentric self, leads us to a lot of problems. We all know what they are because we all have them. It's not exactly normal to wake up and want to Google letter bombs because an app irritated you. But, that's my delusion. But it certainly seems that in later days, delusion has come to the fore of American life in a number of uncomfortable and unsettling and threatening ways. And that problem is compounded by a kind of refusal to accept common facts. Without a common basis in fact, we can't really have knowledge, or we can't have operational knowledge, and we certainly can't have a democracy. The fact that there are stations broadcasting 24-hour-a-day propaganda that makes up their own facts is actually causing great harm to a country. The fact that it's easier for us to go online and read about vaccinations at Joe Rogan's website than it might be to work our way through the CDC website cause a lot of damage, cause a lot of trouble. When I had Hep C for 45 years, I can't tell you the number of people that told me, well, if you just tie a red thread around your wrist and shove a clove of garlic up your butt, it'll get better. And over those 45 years, you tend to try those things, but it wasn't until modern medicine produced a counter to hepatitis C that I was actually cured. And it was not until all of my friends, without exception, who tried only alternative medical cures to cancer are dead. So this belief that there's something we can get better, we can improve, we can find the inside scoop, we can get the real deal, that our government is filled with favoritism and plots, and it may be true. It may be true. A stopped clock is right twice a day, but it's not the whole story. And when we expand the notion of our personality, when we sit zazen, when we soften and dissolve our small mind a little bit and plug into the great big out there, we realize that every question and every answer is there. You can define a problem in a certain way as a limited number of solutions, all of which are unacceptable. If there are infinite solutions, there's no problem. So by continually bathing in that big bath of emptiness, we refresh our minds every day. We break down our kind of rigid thinking, and we open and we open, we look at more and more possibilities. But still, when I survey the United States today, when I survey the kind of rancor and anger and fear that seems to be generated by the slightest provocation, someone being asked to wear a mask in a department store and they go postal, I see that people are really frightened, and I see that people really don't know who to trust or what to trust. So that led me to an article I read in the New Yorker that I wanted to talk about today because I think it's appropriate. So maybe some of you read the New Yorker, maybe some of you don't. Maybe some of you think it's a liberal rag. It's definitely politically liberal, but the reason that I like and trust it is because it's scrupulously adjudicated and edited. I've had friends who've published in the New Yorker, and the fact checking is extremely rigorous. I mean, they put you to the wall. You have to prove and certify everything. So in the beginning of the New Yorker, there's a little column called the Talk of the Town, where they catch up with stuff. And I was grazing through this, and it just happened to be talking about something that I had been noticing. I've been out and about, and I'm vaccinated and I'm double boosted, and I'm 80 years old. And when I go out into public places, I wear a mask. I wear a mask for myself. I wear a mask for other people who don't know if I'm vaccinated or not. And so the New Yorker was talking about COVID in a very kind of calm and interesting way that caught my attention because I've been in a lot of places where all the protocols seem to have ended. Go into restaurants, crowded rooms, people are sitting without masks. They're acting like it's, 2014. And I'm startled. And then I see in the news that who's the head of the Department of Justice? The Attorney General. He got COVID. A whole bunch of political figures got COVID going to a sports dinner. So I wanted to share some things from this article and talk about how they relate to delusion and kind of how we kind of chart a path that's neither fearful nor aggressive to others or intolerant of others, but mindful of the facts. So older Americans in nursing homes make up less than 3% of the population, older Americans. That population has accounted for 1 in 5 COVID deaths. That's 20%. So 20% of old people in nursing homes have died of COVID. They make up of the population, they make up 3% of the population. The death rate for Black people and Hispanics is twice that of white people. Some of that is economic, people who can't sequester, people who live in houses with 5 or 6 apartments with 5 or 6 people. But those are the facts. It's double the death rate. So COVID has exposed a kind of disparity in racial and economic lines it can't be disguised. I think it's contributed to tension in the culture. It's twice that of whites. Red counties, as opposed to blue counties, people in red counties are dying at 3 times the rate of people in blue counties. So Republican-led counties and states, 3 times more people are dying. So we could say, if you're a Democrat, Darwinian, good news for us, but not good news for our country, not good news for our sense of compassion, and not good news for trying to find a way to talk to people that will encourage them to take care of themselves and to take care of each other. I read about a fellow yesterday in the newspaper, 2 days ago in the newspaper, who had been vaccinated 90 times because he was actually selling vaccine cards. He was collecting the vaccine cards under other names and selling them. Well, I was relieved because it tells me the vaccines are not toxic. But there's a perfect example of a me first kind of attitude, right? So people are buying cards proving that they're vaccinated so they can go into public places unknowing, like Typhoid Mary, and dance and drink and party and do dating apps with little or no regard to the people that are around them, who may be old, who may be infirm, who may be sick. And this has been justified by a kind of political attitude. More people died of COVID in 2021 than in 2020. And in this year, we've already lost 130,000 people. So we're at just about the cusp of 1 million deaths. And so when you consider the number of people that each of those deaths touches, nieces, nephews, husbands, wives, lovers, friends, people in the business community, you can see that there's an extremely difficult torquing that's going on all through America. And why are people not paying attention to it? I understand it's boring. I understand no one wants to be engaged with fear. I understand that breathing through a mask all day is not really so good. But suppose I stop thinking about myself for a minute, and suppose I think about other people. If I'm wearing a mask and I walk into a room, anybody can see that I'm concerned with their well-being. I've met people who don't wear masks because they want people to think that they're vaccinated. That's another example of me first thinking. Why would you do that? You do that because you want to participate in a social life. You do that because you want friends and casual relationships and things. You don't want to worry. Or you do it because you think COVID is a fraud, because you have your own set of facts. and you're willing to gamble the lives of other people and your loved ones on that insight. US life expectancy has now fallen by 2 years. It's the sharpest decline in life expectancy in America since World War II. So one of the most prevalent false beliefs about the pandemic is that the government is exaggerating it for political motives, either to get you to buy the vaccine or to some way manipulate you. But according to this article, which I believe, the official count is actually an underestimate, because according to the CDC, more than 100,000 people than normal have died in the last year. And while they can't attribute the deaths to COVID in particular, some of them are probably COVID, and others are things like heart attacks, cancer, the result of failed tests and checkups because the hospitals are full. So the pandemic is not over. Only 2/3 of the country is vaccinated, and that's not enough for herd immunity. Skipped cancer screenings, childhood vaccinations will have a down the road effect. Parts of the country, cases are rising again. There's a new variant called the BA.2. It's another variant of the Omicron. And like the first Omicron, this one is 30 to 40 times more transmissible than the old one. The good news is that our vaccines work and people are not getting hospitalized in the same numbers that they used to. But what it's certifying is that numbers of people are allowing their bodies to be used as petri dishes to grow variants. People who are not getting vaccinated are actually hosting the growth of variants. So here's another area in which self-centered thinking actually leads to a collapse of social thinking and social cohesion. So it's 30 to 50% more contagious than the BA.1 that swept across the US this winter. It's not more lethal. The vaccines seem to be working pretty well. But right now, it still presents a serious threat to anyone who's immunocompromised, to anyone who's older, or anyone with underlying conditions. So I'm thinking about this as I go into a restaurant full of people drinking and laughing and talking and saying, it's over, it's over. So what's the delusion and what are the consequent risks? I could be deluded. Honestly, I could be deluded. All you need is a couple of students and you'll learn quickly how deluded you can be. But if I'm deluded, I'm making myself a little uncomfortable in a mask. And that's about the risk. But if those other people are deluded, thinking that it's over, or scratching the itch by thinking it's over, it's uncomfortable, I don't want to do it, and they just continue with their lives, we're all at risk. And our social stability and our cohesion and our politics and our economics and everything is going to be disordered by a refusal to look at and accept common facts. And Buddha was very, very clear about facts and very, very clear about urging people to use your common sense. When people criticized him, he urged his adherents, please don't be angry at these people. If you get angry, it'll make you unable to judge what they have to say carefully. They might be right. And for your own enlightenment and for your own wisdom, you need to listen to them. So I listen to these people. I also listen to people I know that are scrupulous about facts. This is almost over. Our vaccination rates are lower than those of many European nations. Only 2/3 of Americans are vaccinated. So there's a vaccine out there which has been proven to be effective. It's proven by the death rates among the unvaccinated. It's proven by the lack of hospitalization and by the lack of ventilators and lack of long COVID that's attacking these people. And yet it's not being accepted. And each and every person that doesn't accept it, I have friends that won't get vaccinated, and they have their own reasons and fears and anxieties. But at the same time, they want to play with the grownups. They want to be able to go to the movies. They want to be able to go into restaurants. They want to be able to be in parties. And since no one's wearing a mask now, you can't actually tell the cops from the killers. So you can't tell if someone's infected or not. So this article goes on to make some kind of sound observations. So for instance, by the way, so the Center for Disease Control has indicated that less than 1% of the population currently needs to wear masks. This article is suggesting that that could be a politically motivated solution, because in fact, many churches, many restaurants, many public gathering places are being continuously rigorous about the use of masks. This year, the Biden administration asked for $30 billion in pandemic relief, and the Congress cut it down to $15 billion and has not released any of the money yet. And so what that means is monoclonal antibodies are not getting shipped. They're not laying in your emergency room if you do get sick. They're not getting antiviral pills. Government no longer has the funds to pay for tests or vaccines for uninsured Americans or to secure booster shots for the fall. Politicians have powerful tools for curbing this virus, but for some reason, they're not using it. They're declining to use them. And they're also stymied by the divisiveness between the populations that the anti-vaxxers and the populations that think it's a fraud and the populations that are willing to go along with it because it seems like science and it doesn't seem to be hurting many people. Although it has to be said that all vaccines have some side effect, and the government has an agency, because they've relieved vaccine manufacturers of any responsibility. They've created an agency for byproducts and side effects. So if you get a mumps booster or a measles booster, or you get something like that, or you get a COVID booster and you have a deleterious effect, you can go to this agency and you can apply for relief. So the point of this article, and I'm just going to read this because it's the end of it. Amid the uncertainty, individuals, organizations, and institutions must do their best. That means giving people the resources to confront COVID, not as an abstraction, but through decisions of daily life. During moments of high viral spread, this effort might entail providing rapid tests in the workplace, time off after exposure, outdoor spaces for events, high-grade masks for all who want them, and a culture that respects varying levels of risk tolerance. Decades of behavioral science research have revealed that our decision-making depends on our environment. And even as the politicians are discarding mitigation measures, communities at school, work, church, and elsewhere can make it easier for people to do the right thing. We're going to need investments in ventilation and air filtration systems, paid sick leave, disability benefits, disease surveillance. And it's also true that we have agency. Anyone can get tests. My family, when we travel by plane, when we do anything, we test ourselves. But so the part that interests me is, what do we do as individuals in a climate that is so fragmented? Do we just surrender to our relief that I don't have to wear a mask, I don't have to think about it, I can get it out of my mind, and just run the risk of a new variant and rising tide of difficulty? Or are there disciplines that we can practice, like sitting good zazen, being formal, testing ourselves, being careful in public places, being understanding of people that aren't, asking people before you meet in groups, have you been vaccinated? We need to learn how to do this. And I, for one, would not like to see this solved in Darwinian terms. I don't want to see the people who've believed specious information die because of their mistakes. And I don't want to see our elections fragmented by the continuing effects of COVID and the pandemic. So I guess what I'm saying is it's not over. That's the undiluted fact. It is not over. And yet many of us are acting as if it is over. And that's a delusion with real consequences, immediate consequences, like nuclear weapons. We invented a weapon to protect ourselves, and this weapon has now forced us to sit on our hands while Ukraine is being destroyed. So there are consequences to false beliefs. And I feel like it's part of my job to urge people to think about it and to practice their own protocols and their own caution and care. And let me see if there are any questions. It's wide open. We can talk about anything, but that's what I had on my mind this morning. Any little hands waving? Oh, yes. Linda, go ahead. Just a minute. I have to unmute you. I have to
unmute me. There I am.
There you
Hi,
go.
Pete. Hi,
Sure.
everybody. This is a lot more fun than Facebook. You just mentioned something that I just found so controversial. I mean, we're all in the same camp. I think pretty much everybody that probably listens to Pete is, but to actually ask someone that you're not intimate with to tell you if they're vaccinated, I don't know, that just kind of makes me feel uncomfortable, like it's confrontational. I'm sure that's not how you meant, but I don't know.
Sure.
I don't have the guts right now to ask everybody I meet, but
Well,
I do wear a mask. So
let me tell you the context and how I do it. Maybe it'll seem less controversial. When people come to my house, or if they want to come to my house, I ask them if they've been vaccinated. And if not, tell them that they'll have to wear a mask. It's no more difficult than that. When workmen come to my house, usually they're wearing masks out of respect. But if they come and they don't, I say, hey, man, are you vaccinated? If they say, no, I'm not, I'd say, would you mind wearing a mask?
okay.
It's not much more than that. And it's actually to protect myself, but it's also to protect them. And it's also a way of talking about and bringing the subject to mind.
Okay, thank you, Pete. Appreciate it.
Sure enough. Anyone? Oh, just a second. Yeah, Paula, there you go.
I think it's really like a kind of political sort of taking care of oneself. I mean, I lost a dear housekeeper that I had for like 7 years, who got COVID, who won't get vaccinated, who's an undocumented person, who was just had her own ideas about it. And it was really hard. It was really hard to set a limit. But I just think that we're delusional if we don't think that our politeness, and I'm not speaking to the lady that just spoke, I'm just speaking in generalities, that our politeness or our fear of being the aggressor in a political issue, you have to kind of get over it.
Suppose it was Ebola.
It would be so obvious.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, I agree. And I also agree I understand what Linda was feeling. It does feel intrusive. And so part of our skill is to try to do these things without judgment. It's like, if you don't want to get vaccinated, I get it. But then you ought to wear a tattoo, unvaccinated, or you ought to wear a mask to warn others so that they can behave appropriately. But to buy a phony vaccine card so you can go to a rock and roll show is pretty unconscionable.
You know, someone who bought them for his teenage daughter who couldn't go to school in California, who was my person I got my home mortgage from. I was appalled. I mean, to teach that to your child?
Welcome to Dumbfuckistan.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, I want to thank. Oh, sorry. Who's waving?
Yeah.
Oh, Ruby.
Diana here.
Oh, sorry. I see the hands now. I didn't see them.
Oh,
Diana, hi.
hi. Yeah, it was really good to hear you talk about this. And what was coming to my mind was how to address the loneliness, because people want to go to shows and want to be involved because they're lonely. And I know, or I'm assuming so. And I know that that's something that's easier for me to feel compassion toward in myself or in anyone else than self-centeredness. And loneliness can arise partly because of self-centeredness. But when I use the phrase self-centered, I immediately feel critical.
Right.
Like,
very good.
It's something that I want to disown in myself. And so I immediately, I can identify others being self-centered, but it's harder to see that in myself. So just addressing the loneliness as something that I can relate to, and I don't really know, I guess I don't really know where to go with that right now. It's just something that I'm holding in my mind for now, I guess.
Well, it's really useful and it's really kind. I mean, just holding it in mind allows you to look at people who are behaving in a way that might be contrary to your interests in a non-judgmental way. And it also affords you some strategies for approaching them or talking to them. I think it's very beautiful, actually. Thank you so much. Ruby?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the New Yorker magazine as being extremely factual, because I feel what we have now going on worldwide is a propaganda war. There's so many different narratives that are being propagated on all different sides. So it's not just about the pandemic, but it's about most issues. There's a propaganda war going on.
So what's under the propaganda? What's behind the propaganda?
It's just a different form of warfare, I feel. People are...
okay, what's behind the warfare?
Hate and delusion.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, propaganda is a strategy for getting something you want without regard to whether it's good for other people or not. So one of the reasons I left the life of politics and became a Buddhist was because I realized everything was dependent on individual people and what they did. And, although I joke a lot and say, well, the problem with Buddhism is there's people in it. It's the problem with everything. And so we're trying to address how to be clearer, kinder, less swayable people. And I like Diana's humanizing of behavior that I would tend to see as antisocial or selfish, as being driven by loneliness. And I like it particularly, not only because it's kind, but because it's actionable.
Yeah.
Nancy, you have a hand up. Wait.
Thank you.
yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thanks. I had COVID. I'm now negative, but this was after 2.5 years of scrupulous behavior in New York City. And I'm thinking I might have it's so hard. You play Sherlock Holmes. It's really hard to figure it out, whether stress levels change because of things. But I have a friend who's not vaxxed, and she's not been vaxxed from the beginning. It's a conspiracy thing. She can live in Connecticut a lot of the time, so she's not in the city. I would like it if you could repeat what you said about this new variant and how the non-vaxxers may carry it unbeknownst to them, because I think that's an argument that I can use to and share with other of my friends who are vaxxers who spend time with this person.
Okay, so there's a new subvariant of Omicron. And the first one was called B.A.1. And the new one is called B.A.2. It's just a variant, right? And Omicron is now dominant in the United States and around the world because it's so transmissible. And scientists are thinking this one is 50% more contagious than BA1. So it might replace it around the world. It doesn't appear to be more lethal, but vaccines remain effective in averting the most serious consequences. Still, it will cause lots of breakthrough infections. And one of the things that's not talked about too much on the news is the possibility of getting long COVID from breakthrough infections. And that is long. I had one friend who had COVID who said he felt fuzzy headed for a year after he was negative and cured. So you could get it's the current issue of the New Yorker. I'll show you the cover, and I'd gift it to them. There it is. Just a minute. I'm learning all these things. I can lower this hand, lower hand. Anyone else? No. Well, I look forward to hearing from you if you found this more enjoyable than Facebook. And I'm going to try to do it again unless I get a groundswell. And I'm going to stay on the line a little bit in case there are people that would like to be Oh, Paul, you want to say something again?
Yeah, I don't know how to contact you because on my Facebook connection, I can't do that. I can read what you write, but I can't comment.
Really? So does that mean I have to friend you?
I don't really know. I don't know.
Well, look, I'll just give you an email. Okay. Let me just look and see. Oh yeah. It's SF like San Francisco, Zen Coyote, SF Zen
Okay.
Coyote
I'll write it down
at
and see.
Gmail.
Okay, thank
Gmail.
you. Thank you.
Sure enough. Anyway, Sandra, hi. You want to say something?
Yeah, real quick. We can put our comments in the chat.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
already there.
Yes.
Better than Facebook. Thank you, Peter. Thank you. Good. Thanks.
Okay.
So I so appreciate seeing everyone and talking to them. My Dharma brother, Ed Sadison, suggested that I try this, and it's really great.